20 meters.
Hi, NJ4Z here. John Gendron. I am the current president of York County Amateur Radio Society, York County, South Carolina. We are an amateur radio club founded in 1948, making us one of the oldest continually operating radio clubs in the state of South Carolina. Tonight we normally would be at our clubhouse to have our monthly series of program meetings, an educational program that we do 10 months a year. But unfortunately, with the coronavirus situation, I can't be at the clubhouse because we're not allowed to gather in more than groups of 3. So we have a very limited staff there doing the production tonight. Through some very generous donations of club members and others, we have the ability to attend a meeting virtually. So we are doing a live stream this evening, and also we'll have this recorded back on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to it if you get the opportunity. Tonight the program meeting, an educational program presented by Daniel Boyer, WD2DW, or Whiskey Delta 2 Delta Whiskey. He's an active member of our club. He's also an assistant emergency coordinator for our York County Aries group, and also the EC for Skywarn in York County, which is also tied into the Aries group. Daniel has attended very many weather classes, advanced spotting classes, and he's a weather geek, much like myself. But Daniel has a wealth of information, and it holds an extra class license, is very into DMR, and so we're excited to have him this evening doing this presentation, and we thank him very much for the willingness to do it on camera, because it's not an easy thing to do. That being said, I do want to make a few comments about the coronavirus situation. It's serious, so obviously we're taking the precautions that the state recommends and not having a meeting at our clubhouse, but we thought it would be great to have it virtually, and we can share it with the world. It's not the introduction to the world we'd hoped that we'd have, but it's what we're dealing with, and we'll go forward from here. But please, if you find value to what we're presenting tonight, subscribe to our channel, and we will be providing future content here, not only our business meetings and our program meetings, but some other content as we develop it. We are very much making a push to do things virtually and to provide content not only to our club members, but to club members, to amateur radio operators all over the world. It's part of the radio hobby is to express and share your ideas. But getting back to the coronavirus, I would encourage you to leverage your communication skills and your clubs to check in on older members, those at risk, those that may have underlying conditions that are higher risk for exposure to this virus, and we need to watch out for those folks and try to help them where we can. So if you're leveraging your local repeaters to create nets to get the word out, use your telephones to check on these people and run errands if they need things to take care of, so we can limit the exposure. One of the things about amateur radio, we all know it's an older hobby, and a lot of our key membership is in that demographic that is at high risk. So we need to do as much as we can to serve our communities and our memberships and our fellow hams. Speaking of communities, you know, invest yourself into Aries or Oxcom, learn about it, and try to help out with your emergency management folks. Not that I think with this being a health crisis that we're going to see much in the way of communication failures, those kind of things, but there may be other things you can do, and if they're familiar with you through the Aries groups, they may be able to utilize your skills or other skills that you may have to help out emergency management in times they need it. So I would encourage you to get involved with Aries and Oxcom at this point in time. Without further ado, thank you for coming in this evening. Thank you for allowing me to introduce you to our club, and I would like to encourage you again to tune in and often, and to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and to enjoy the program this evening. Daniel Boyer is a very engaging person. I think you'll enjoy it. So WD2DW, NJ4Z, take it away, Daniel, and NJ4Z is clearing out.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. As John said, my name is Daniel Boyer. Call sign is WD2DW. Even though it's a 2 call, I am actually a 4 land. And I got started in amateur radio about 2 years ago now. And like many, I got involved in the Skywarn program very early on. I took the basic online Skywarn spotter training program, which is available to any and all. You don't have to be an amateur radio operator, and I highly encourage you to take the course. They provide a lot of good information on weather spotting, how to stay safe, what weather service is looking for in a report, as well as a basic convective meteorology, how things form and what they do. And what we found was that a lot of that information stays the same. It's all the same slides, the same pictures, the same conversations, and it got kind of dry. So I was approached a few years ago with a challenge, if you will, to make it interesting. And we found a lot of success with this program. So I've done a lot of traveling, a lot of learning, absorbing a lot of information, asked a lot of questions, gotten a lot of answers, and put together kind of a presentation to answer some of those questions and to see what it is that we face here locally, as well as the basics of radar interpretation from the perspective of a spotter or a Skywarn trained individual. So with that, we can go ahead and get started. Quick overview of the radar system. The WSR-88D, as usual, the federal government, it's always an acronym. There's some debate as to whether it's the Weather Service Radar 88 or the Weather Surveillance Radar, but I can't get a straight answer either way. 88 is reference to the year that it was released and that they started to utilize this piece of equipment. To date, there's 160 or so locations around the world. They're operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Department of Commerce, Federal Aviation, and the Department of Defense. As you can see, they transmit 2.8 gigahertz at 750,000 watts. So a lot of power, microwave. The radar itself has 3 products that it returns, and there's only 3 products. Any other product you see comes from the computer. It's the data analytics. They take that information out of those products, they process them, and they generate other computer-generated products, derived products they're called. And yes, that's right, that radar technology is older than I am. However, there is constantly improvement programs taking place to keep them up to date. That's the quick picture of the San Juan, Puerto Rico radar dome after Hurricane Maria, with the radar missing, so you can get a good image of what the antenna system should look like. Again, there's only 3 products that it will produce on its own, and that is the reflectivity product, the velocity product, and the spectrum width product. And here you can see this is a reflectivity product in the upper left corner. This over here is a velocity product, and we're going to go into depth as to what each of those kind of relates to and how they work. This is what you typically see on the news with rain or other hydrometeors. Velocity is reference to the wind data, and these down here are spectrum width. This is a correlation coefficient diagram. Again, we'll get into a little bit more on that. So the typical reflectivity gradient that you see on your local news or from the National Weather Service is what you look at when you say, is it going to rain tomorrow? And they play the fast forward, and you can view your reflectivity, the products in the atmosphere. And the scale on the bottom relates to how thick and how dense the reflected beam is, or the product that the beam's reflecting off of. So in an open area like this where you have no reflectivity, there shouldn't be anything in the atmosphere that would cause rain, sleet, snow, hail. As you get into the darker reds and eventually into the purples and blues, you'll see the heavier, more dense rainfall rates or hail, whatever it may be. This is that same image, but on a velocity product. And on a velocity product, what you're looking at, the red color is wind that's going away from the radar beam. Green is wind that's moving towards the radar beam. That becomes important when we talk about severe weather and convectivity to be able to tell strength and direction. Again, with the gradient where the darker the color, the less intense the return. The brighter, hotter colors are areas of heavy winds. Radar sampling patterns, it's a velocity scan. The way it works, the radome is set to an elevation. In most places, your base elevation is 0.5 degrees. And the way it works is it sends out a pulse, and it listens, it moves, it sends out a pulse, it listens, and it does a complete 360-degree scan at a half a degree. The antenna tilts back to, in this case, 1.5 degrees, completes another scan, and so on, up to, this chart has it at 4.5, they go a little bit higher than that now. And the reason that this is important is because in a clean air mode, where you don't have any precipitation expected, it takes about 2 minutes to complete one elevation scan. That means it can take up to 10 minutes or sometimes longer to complete a full scan. In precipitation mode, where the radar has detected precipitation in the atmosphere, it goes down to about 1 minute per elevation, but you can see they add in other elevation slices so that you can build a 3D model of a storm. In that situation, it can take 5 to 6 minutes to complete a scan. So you open up your radar application, and there's a severe weather situation, and you observe data. That data can be 5 to 6 minutes old, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the information that you have in front of you. In storm mode, you can see they add some more elevation slices, and they go down to about 30 seconds per elevation. But what you see is as the time frame shrinks for each elevation scan, you have less data to work with. It's not listening for as long. So your beam won't go as far, you won't get as good of a picture at a longer distance. To help to kind of combat some of this, they introduced a tool called SAILS. Again, it's an acronym. It stands for Supplemental Adaptive Intra-Volume Low-Level Scans. It sounds fancy. In reality, what it is after it completes one, it'll move up to the next elevation. It'll complete that elevation. It'll go back down and do a quick scan, then go to elevation 3, come back down, do a quick scan, however they have it set up. That is a manual mode that they can enter to determine if something is changing rapidly at the ground level. The other product in the spectrum width is dual polarization radar, or as it's referred to, dual pol. Improvement to conventional Doppler, because what it does is it identifies the actual hydrometeor or the precipitation object in the cloud. So you can see a reflectivity image, a big red ball coming at you, and you can't really tell by looking at it if it's rain, if it's hail, if it's a flock of birds. What dual polarization does, you get two orientations from the radar beam. You get a horizontal and a vertical, and it tells you the differential of the material. So if the material in the cloud that you're scanning is all the same, or if it happens to be different. Hail appears spherical, it's tumbling in motion and generally uniform in size, to where raindrops are different sizes, different shapes. They tend to move and flatten as they fall through the atmosphere. And we can take a look at a couple of those examples here in a few minutes. This is actually a dual polarization image. Again, with your scale on the bottom, you can tell, this up here is a lot of rain, 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 because the higher the scale, it's indicating differential in those hydrometeors, or rain. Severe weather generators that we deal with here, and everybody deals with, but some of them we deal with more than others. Pulse storms, that's your typical Carolina summer night storm. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun's been heating everything all day. It's hot, humid, miserable, muggy day, and out of nowhere it starts to rain. The storm just pops up, dumps a bucket of rain, and goes on. Doesn't usually produce too much for severe weather. When you start to see multiple back-to-back-to-back, you can have chaining or training of storms, and that can cause some flooding issues. You generally don't have a good convective environment for pulse storms, but it is a huge thing that we face here in the Carolinas, where we've all been there. There's a 10% chance of rain, and all of a sudden it's raining on your house, but your neighbor's yard's still dry. That's a pulse storm. Multi-cell clusters are what you see over here to the right. It's, as it sounds, there's multiple cells that are usually independent of each other. Some can feed on each other. They can generate some severe weather, some hail at times, given the right environment. Rarely tornado producers, but it can happen, again, depending on your specific convective ingredients. The supercell, we're going to talk about a little bit here in a couple slides, but the supercell is when you take a severe weather course, a sky-worn training course, you see the supercell. You see the supercell a lot. Supercells put down your long track tornadoes. They are the big bad storms that everybody talks about. And in the Carolinas, specifically in our area, we don't really see a whole lot of supercells. The terrain doesn't really support it. The environment doesn't really support it. They do happen. You get the occasional rogue supercell. But mostly what we face and what we're going to talk about and focus on is the quasi-linear convective system. Fancy terminology. The common nomenclature is a squall line. For some of the skywarn folks, you've heard them bow echoes and things of that nature. Quick recap of National Weather Service severe weather criteria. For a storm to generate a severe thunderstorm warning, it has to meet one of these three pieces of criteria here. Winds in excess of 58 miles per hour, hail greater than 1 inch diameter, and tornado funnel cloud or very tight rotation. We'll get into that with velocity products here in a minute. Quickly, the limitations, beam scatter. As we talked about with a radio signal of any kind, the farther away you get, the less reliable the results are. When you start to shrink that beam scan distance and focus on something and cut down the time on that volume coverage pattern, you start to have limitations in your distance. So you can't reach out quite as far and get the same return. You can have clouds in the way. If you have this massive cell in between your radar dish and the cell behind it, you can't get a good picture of the cell behind it because the cell in front is going to absorb and reflect that radio signal. What you see here is a good example of that. This is a tornadic cell here. This is a correlation coefficient product, I believe. Yep. 1/2 degree elevation scan. This was just a few weeks ago, actually. Out of Greenville, Spartanburg. Your radar dish is up here, and you see you've got good return in here, and then you see these streaks. That's because this cell right here is so big and so powerful that the beam can't get through it to tell what's back here. But you can see this storm has a severe thunderstorm warning attached to it down here around the Edgefield area. This would go on to produce a tornado. But with this cell in the way, it's really hard to get good imaging on that. Again, time of the scan. In a supercell situation where the cell is, by its definition, self-sustaining, self-supporting, and can go for hundreds of miles, a 3-minute scan, things can change, but they don't change as drastically as they do with a system similar to this. What you end up with here is within 3 minutes, a storm can go from not severe by criteria to putting a tornado on the ground to on about its business before the radar dish catches that was a severe storm. Again, we'll see that here in a minute. The other big thing is elevation over distance. The radome at Greenville, Spartanburg, I don't have its exact altitude, but with the beam at 1 degree here in Rock Hill, South Carolina, that angle of the beam puts the beam at 8,000 feet. That's the lowest level that beam can see, is 8,000 feet above my head. And is that really useful? It is, but you can't see what's going on the ground. That's where the Skywarn spotter and the weather media and weather stations, webcams, things like WeatherBug, things like that are very important because you get real-time on-the-ground data. And that can help to generate warnings, notify people of situations, and they can be used to generate products to warn people in the path of the storm. The other thing is temperature. So the radar is really good at determining that there's precipitation in a cloud and it's likely reaching the ground. But at 8,000 feet, is that precipitation snow? Is it hail? Is it rain? Oftentimes you'll see on a warning product such as this here, you'll actually see it say radar indicated hail, because the radar can tell you there's hail in that cloud at 8,000 feet. Is that hail making it to the ground? Those are the important That's the importance of reporting things like hail to the National Weather Service. And then complacency. This one hit me pretty hard. It was one of the big indicators for me to focus on and do this. Think to yourself how many times in your life you have been inside the warning polygon on a tornado warning. For me, it's been probably around a dozen total times in my entire life. How many tornadoes have I been impacted by? 0. So it leads to that sense of, there's another weather alert, there's another one. So it's the third time this week this has happened. Very recently, we're going to take a look at the radar imaging of it. We had a situation where we were put under that box, and having this knowledge and having the ability to take a quick look at the radar and go, ooh, that looks bad, and know what I was looking at for certainty to be able to make that decision, put us in our safe place. It also took moving the radios into the safe place, moving the computers into the safe place, because now, oh, that looks bad, I need to get to the computer is in the safe place, but coincidence. June 23rd, 2019. Steve remembers this. This is our field day setup for the ARRL Summer Field Day. This little communications trailer here. See the satellite dish on top. One of our members so graciously, thank you, Ted, brought this trailer out, set it up. That's satellite internet. That dish is tracking a satellite, getting internet beamed down to it, blanketing our field day site in Wi-Fi. I think we registered about a gig down and something similar going up. High-speed satellite internet, on the fly, ready to go. Steve's trailer down here, they're operating radios in there. This van's got radios operating. There is a phased array set up over here, DX Commander verticals, big setup. Lots of time, money, and effort went into putting this setup together. Naturally, I was watching the radar, and I identified this here. So this star is us. This is our field day site. I looked off to the back, saw some, we call them SLCs, scary-looking clouds. I'm like, the weather outlook was a little off for the day. Things just didn't really, okay, whatever. We'll take a look at it. So I bring up, this is a velocity product, and you can see this area here has got some strong winds moving away from the radar. You've got some strong winds across. This cell ended up with a severe thunderstorm warning, but the cell that generated the severe thunderstorm warning was down here and moving this way. It wasn't really geared at us because you can see this big thing here doesn't have a warning. So the warning was focused down here. We were focused down here, and 5 minutes later, that happened. This massive intensity here, strong winds that built that quick over 5 minutes. So that's not good. So I look out from the operating position we were in, and we have this massive cloud lowering here. That's what we call a scary-looking cloud. And at that point in time, I got on the radio, and I called to whomever happened to be listening, but we had 6 operators operating at that event. They all had headsets on. Nobody could hear, nobody was listening to the 2-meter radio, because everybody was all in HF world doing the contest thing, right? Field day's not a contest. So I finally got Ted's attention. I called him on his phone. I said, Ted, you're going to want to put your trailer up. Ted put his trailer up. He locked it all down. A few minutes later, we got hit with a microburst. It's about 70, 75 miles an hour, judging by the tree limbs that were snapped off. We had one trailer lose an awning. We lost one DX commander in the fray. The communications trailer survived because somebody identified that it was coming, and we started to take measures to prevent serious damage. This is your supercell. Actually, this is the Moore Tornado Supercell, May 20th, 2013. This supercell took 24 lives. This is what you see when you take a Skywarn training class. If you go through convective basics, this is what you see. You learn to identify these inflow notches. Here's where your tornado is going to be. This is a hook echo. Here's your rear flank downdraft. You can learn all those terms and all that. It's very helpful to understand until you're faced with that. This is real life. You can see my friend on Facebook Messenger messaged me, hey man, the clouds to my west are getting a little rough. What's going on? He's right over here, right about that neck of the woods. And maybe a little closer to 321. It's over this way. Steve and I were at Chester State Park. Saw that come up on the radar, and I went, that's not good. You can kind of see an inflow notch there. There's a little bit of a hook echo starting to form, but there's just so much precipitation in this line. When you switch to your velocity product, this is called a radar couplet. If you remember the scale, these bright colors are stronger winds. In order for a velocity product to generate a tornado warning by National Weather Service standards, it has to show gate-to-gate shear of 100 knots. If you want to get in here and measure this, pixel to pixel, if this is 60 knots, this is 40 knots, you have 100 knots, there's your shear, that generates that warning. What that means and what you're looking for is this couplet. You see this bright spike here. It's a good indication that that is rotating very heavily, very tight rotation. On a mesocyclone, you see that giant rotating motion. That's a very broad area of rotation. You've probably heard that term during a severe weather event, broad area of rotation. When that starts to tighten up, this is what that looks like on radar. This storm did not produce a tornado. Because again, that's a tight area of rotation, but not every tight area of rotation will catch that updraft and force a funnel cloud, etc. You don't always have a tornado. But you notice this here icon, so this program here is called Radar Scope, by the way. It's something that I've subscribed to. I recommend it. It's a very good program and is reasonably priced. This is called a tornado vortex signature. And what that is a computer derivative product that estimates this cell meets the criteria that it could spawn a tornado. This is a computer-generated product. Very few tornadoes have a tornado vortex signature attached. Very few tornado vortex signatures have a tornado attached. It's a phenomenon from the computer that it generates based on its algorithm. It's helpful. But in this area, if you look at Greenville, just to the west of Greenville on the mountain, everything that rolls over it has rotation attached to it, because that's just the way the computer sees it, and that's what it does. Whether it's there or not, you have to make that determination. This is this year. This slideshow used to be filled with a lot of Oklahoma versus South Carolina presentation material. About December of last year, I had it all done and ready to go, because severe weather season doesn't happen until March, right? This was this year, January 11th. We had a squall line move through a quasi-linear convective system. This is a velocity product. You see high velocity imaging here, high velocity imaging here, here, here. Why did this storm generate that tornado warning? By the way, this is the one that put us in the safe room, because we live right about there. And this was coming right for us. The reason being, you can see strong winds, they're all going in the same direction. And then you have this notch. This is your inflow notch. This line is starting to break apart because this is moving faster than this, and that is starting to generate a rotational current right here. With this gate-to-gate shear here being in excess of 100 knots, that generated a tornado warning. This generated a tornado warning. This didn't. These are damage markers. These are estimated locations of damage, in this case trees down, based on radar imaging at the time. This caused damage. This caused damage. This didn't. This caused damage. This one got a tornado warning. So this is where, if you live here and you're monitoring this situation, you see this coming, and with a little bit of a heads up, hey, I know what this means. It may not be a tornado-warned storm, but I've got something expensive outside. My family's outside. My daughter's out cutting the grass, whatever the case may be. In this situation, you want to take shelter over here. Same storm system. A few weeks later, you see this cell here, this cell here, this cell here, this cell here, this one here. Everything's under severe thunderstorm warning. That's the yellow box, is a severe thunderstorm warning. The red boxes are tornado warnings. Look at how bright that is on that. That's 1 pixel. That's 1 pixel. Those two generated tornado warnings. These didn't. These also didn't produce tornadoes. When you look at this here, you have all this forward motion, but this is that broad area of rotation we were talking about. Is this technically rotating? Maybe. If you want to go out there and take a look at it, it could have some rotation to it. But this tight couplet here, that's a tornado signature. North Central High School, Kershaw County. EF2 tornado, I believe it was this cell down here, went on over this way. Did significant damage. Tornadoes that we face here versus tornadoes that you hear about on TV and you see on, every other presentation that you may sit through. A tornado in the Midwest, for example, on a supercell, the Moore, Oklahoma tornado. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. It was between 1/2 mile and 1 mile wide and dozens of miles long, the damage path. Those are what you see with Joplin, with El Reno again. All of the big Midwestern tornadoes, you see massive damage tracks. Here in the Carolinas, you don't see that frequently. This tornado's path was a few 100 yards in width and a few 1/10 of a mile long. Still spawned an EF2 tornado. Still completely destroyed this building. They're not going to be able to salvage much out of that. It's gone. So those are the things that we face. 2/6 of this year. Again, had after this event, had the presentation all ready to go. All right, we're good. Severe weather season's coming up. We're going to be able to push through this project, get everything done. Last month, we get hit again. This was the Spartanburg tornado on radar. This is your velocity image. You see your gate-to-gate shear. It generated a tornado warning. You see your damage reports here. This was the beginning of a quasi-linear convective system that pushed through, spawned a bunch of tornadoes, made the news. It's a big deal. This was a rogue cell that pushed out in front. It was the first one to fire off. Was at work, saw that pop up, said, man, that doesn't look good over Spartanburg. Storm generated a tornado warning, put down a tornado. Are there any questions up to this point? All right, good roll. A little while goes by. That cell continued to intensify. You can see your velocity products here. This is a base velocity product. And in this situation, the base velocity product will show you wind speed and wind direction as it relates to the radar beam. Well, it's hard sometimes to get an accurate depiction of what's going on inside this cell because the whole line is moving. So there's a computer derivative product. It's called a storm relative velocity. And what it does is it takes the wind speed and minuses the speed of the storm itself. And that's where you see this tight little couplet here. That was the Spartanburg tornado. That tornado touchdown did a lot of damage, wiped out some buildings. They had to open a Red Cross shelter. People were put in shelters. It was a very serious situation. A few hours goes by, maybe an hour at most. This tight couplet here, this velocity here, registered as a tornado warning. So you can see the red box. There's some tornado damage indicators. Those indicators were not based on specific location. They were based on the zip code. So this would be 28052 maybe. But anyway, these are Gaston County. Here's your state line. Goes kind of like this. This is Dixon School Road in southern Cleveland County, North Carolina. EF2 tornado touched down, wiped out some Duke Power transmission lines, estimated wind speeds 130 miles an hour, wrecked a couple of houses, tore up some trees. The damage was impressive. This tornado then moved directly east, but again, it's not a long tracking tornado. Cell moved east, moved across, touched down right about here in the tip of Fort Mill, basically our President John's parking lot. Moved east, did some damage in Pineville, did some damage in Ballantyne, moved over here, did some damage in Matthews, continued out into Cabarrus County where it did some more damage. The idea with that tornado is it came down, did some damage, went up, went across, came down, did some damage, went up, went across. It just kept hopping along. Made the news. A local TV meteorologist, it touched down in his backyard. He was out live streaming, Facebook Live. It made the news for a couple of days. Pictures of Duke Energy's transmission towers twisted up into a ball, because that's what sells, is the damage pictures, the carnage of weather. Greenville Spartanburg, from the emergency manager, this is the report on that tornado, the initial report from that tornado. Extensive damage along West Main Street along I-26. 2 tractor trailers flipped, buildings collapsed. Debris signature observed, likely a tornado. This is the tornado that touched down in Gaston County, just a few miles east of there. Came from one of our weather spotters. Came from amateur radio. Tree down on a house in Gastonia, likely due to a tornado. This is where I'll hit on the amateur radio portion of it. Support your local Skywarn nets. We, as Skywarn net control stations, have direct communications with National Weather Service. When you report something on amateur radio or via Twitter or to the 1-800 number to your local office, if you're a Skywarn spotter, you get a phone number to call to make reports. That information is taken into consideration by the meteorologists. Because again, you are at the ground level. If there's hail falling and you report that, that meteorologist who's sitting there kind of going, it looks like there's hail in the cloud, but is there hail on the ground? Is this storm severe? It's right there on that cusp. Hey, is that a report? Yeah, amateur radio, Skywarn spotter, on the ground, there's hail on the ground. Okay, if there's hail on the ground and there's hail in the cloud that's making it to the ground, that's a severe storm. Let's go ahead and warn that. Before that severe thunderstorm warning is implemented, people aren't paying attention to the weather very often. They're going about their daily lives. When they're going about their daily lives, that severe weather warning gives them that break that, wait, what was that? Oh, severe thunderstorm. When I look at that, I go, severe thunderstorm warning. Let me bring up the radar and take a look and see what's going on. Okay, this is serious. This is impacting me now. It's that notification. It's that heads up. If that report of hail hadn't come in, National Weather Service is relying on the radar entirely to make that decision to put out that warning product to potentially save someone's life. During this event, made national TV news. Tornadoes in Gastonia, tornadoes through Charlotte, big deal. Like I said, Facebook Live, local meteorologists were out live streaming. And meanwhile, right here in our county, in York County, South Carolina, the next day, people were cleaning up. There was, the community's coming together, they're feeding the volunteers, the linemen are out putting the power back on, and during all of that, there's a family right here in this county mourning the loss of a loved one. It wasn't a tornado. Wind. Tree fell. The car hit the tree, or did the tree hit the car? They don't know. This storm took someone's life. This storm right here was a fatal storm in the state of South Carolina. Please take it seriously. If you're not already a Skywarn spotter, the training is free. It is open to everyone. Go online, skywarn.org is the website. The training is offered there free. It is through, I believe it's METED. They put on a basics of Skywarn spotting and a convective meteorology course that will teach you the basics of weather and how things form when it comes to severe weather, what to look for. And if anyone has any questions, we are in the YouTube chat. We're on the local repeater. The echo link is active. Actually, it's K4YTZ-R. We're on the DMR PRN system, chat 2. If you have questions afterwards or something you want help with, something you need access to, shoot me an email. My call sign is WD2DW. I'll put it in the description in the comments too. My email address is listed, my phone number is listed. Give me a call, ask your questions, and we'll do whatever we can to get you helped out. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the first to try out this new method of delivery, and hopefully it's successful. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and sticking along with us tonight. I know we've had multiple check-ins on the net, multiple comments on the YouTube channel. So like and subscribe. Let us know if this is the content you're looking for, and hopefully we'll be able to keep going and make the best of this situation.
Parks on the air, calling CQ 20 meters. Parks on the air, calling CQ 20 meters.